Yo, what's up guys? Boss here. In today's video, we're going to be doing another tier list. So I did a tier list about 2.5 months ago, but since then, the Goblin Drill got added to the game, and also we've seen some buffs and nerfs, so I decided it would be time to create a new one because the meta is completely different than how it was a couple months ago. And I've been playing this game now for 5 years. I've played competitive, ladder, on a daily basis, so I feel like I have a good understanding of the game, and I'll do my best, to rank these cards, accordingly. Of course, my own opinion. You guys as always, can let me know in the comments, what do you agree with, what do you disagree with. Of course, F tier is going to be the tier that the card essentially is really bad, it sucks, it's in need of a buff. D means it's on the weaker end, might not necessarily need a buff, but it's still pretty weak. C and B are kind of average, like C, maybe on the lower end of average, B a little bit on the upper end of average. A means it's like very strong, but not quite needed of a nerf. And then S tier obviously means the card could probably use a bit of a nerf or a rework, something along those lines. So if you guys want to support me, use my creator code boss, really appreciate that. In any Supercell game, it mean a lot. And also, subscribe if you guys don't want to miss, any other tier lists or gameplay. I upload, videos almost every day. So let's get started here. We're going to go for the Wizard, which I'm actually going to go ahead and put in D tier. It's pretty weak. I know a lot of, mid-ladder players might disagree with this, but Wizard is just, it doesn't fit in any, meta deck, and it's very weak. It doesn't have a lot of health, and I think it could use... It's not awful. There are sometimes we see people push up really, really high with the Wizard. It's rare, but we do see it, but it's definitely on the weaker end. Expo is going to be in C tier. Ever since it got that rework, it hasn't really been too strong. It's definitely a below average card slightly. I don't think it's D or F though. You can still have success with it, but obviously in Expo decks, it's not the Expo itself that's very strong. It's usually other cards carrying the deck. Zap is actually going to be put in C tier. It used to be a very, very strong card, but recently it has not been a very, efficient spell, as good in the meta. It's, kind of been overshadowed by other spells. Obviously we see, Log and Fireball way more than the Zap right now. Zappies are going to actually go ahead and be put in C tier right now too. In this meta, we don't see a lot of them. We don't see Recruits, Royal Hogs very often, which of course was the best deck with the Zappies because of all the Goblin Drill. Healer is going to be in D tier. It's honestly pretty weak right now. I think it should be weak though. I do not want to see, I don't know about you guys, I do not want to see an Elixir Golem healer meta. That was super toxic. We've already experienced that before for a few months, and I think where Healer's at right now is where the card belongs. It's still viable. We see it very, very rarely, but it's not, too strong, and that's honestly how it should be. So we're actually starting this list off with a lot of the weaker cards, so it looks like we're going to build our way up, because look at this Battle Ram here too. I think it's a D tier card right now too. It's one of the worst win conditions in the game right now. I don't see it very often. It's only used in P.E.K.K.A, but there's just so many win conditions that are way stronger than it right now, such as the Goblin Drill especially, that it's not very good right now. And actually, this is going to be our first F tier card. The Bomb Tower is pretty weak right now after the nerf it got. I would actually say it might be the worst building in the game. I never see it. So many interactions are very, very bad now after the Death Bomb got nerfed by 50%. I mean, I just see that even the Tombstone more than the Bomb Tower now. Lava with, Tombstone, I never see Bomb Tower anymore. I think it could use a very, very small buff. I can't believe I'm saying that because of how broken it used to be. It was like an S tier card, but now it's all the way in F tier after, the nerf it got. So Bomber, I'm actually going to put this all the way up in A tier. We're going to get our first card that's actually pretty solid. Bomber is just great right now because it fits really well in Golem. Now that it's 2 Elixir, it fits well in Lava Hound. You even see it in Drill Cycle decks. It's just such a solid card. I'm even tempted to put it in S tier, but I don't think it needs a nerf. I think it's A tier, it's strong, but it's good where it's at. It really gets a lot of value for only 2 Elixir, but it does have counters. I mean, obviously, it's not broken. I don't think it's oppressive or anything like that, but it's a very, very strong card for 2 Elixir. Bowler is going to be put in C tier. Bowler's finally getting some, solid usage rate. It's always been one of those cards that I would have put in D tier, but now we're seeing it in Graveyard. We're seeing it in Electro Giant a little bit. Of course, Dark Prince is used more than the Bowler is in Electro Giant, which is why I'm not putting it in B tier or A tier, just because I think it's slightly below average, but it's definitely a solid card. Cannon is actually going to be in D tier. I think I before put it in F tier, but after the buff it got, it's actually, you know, of course decent, especially in 2.6 now. And I think it's it's a solid card. And Cannon card, kind of like the Cannon recently got buffed, it's going to be put in B tier because I think that it's kind of like slightly above average or right kind of in the middle of average. We see it a decent amount in ladder. We see it in competitive. There's this really strong mortar deck with Royal Hogs and Cannon Cart that a lot of people are running in CRL. And even though it's 5 elixir, it can be very, very annoying because if it, you know, locks on the tower, then it's going to take like half the tower or, you know, even more because of the ability it has, like when it like loses its, you know, cart and then the cannon just stays there, can really come in clutch in lots of situations. Also on defense, not just offense, it can get a lot of value. So I think it's a solid card. For what it is, it's definitely average. Clone is going to be in D tier. It's just one of those cards that's kind of a little bit, you know, it's a little off meta, but it works in Golem Clone, Lava Clone. I don't want to see Clone getting a buff because if you remember when it had that larger radius, it was absolutely broken in Golem Clone, Lava Clone. I do not want to go back to that. I like where it is. It's a little weak, but I think that's fine. Dark Prince, in this meta, guys, Dark Prince is in A tier. Do I think the card needs a nerf? No. But why is it used a lot right now? Because it's one of the only counters in the whole game to the Goblin Drill. I mean, it's insanely broken. Honestly, the Dark Prince against the Goblin Drill, it's one of the only counters to the Goblin Drill because the Valkyrie can be fireballed away. So that's why it's used right now in the meta. It's so good in the meta. Is it broken? Doesn't need a nerf? Definitely not. It's just broken in this specific meta because it's one of the only counters in the whole game, as I mentioned, to the Goblin Drill. Dark Goblin, a little bit, in my opinion, of like an underrated card, but I can't put it any higher than C tier. I just, you know, it is a little underrated. Like I think a lot of people think it's like horrible, one of the worst cards in the game. I think it's like slightly below average. It's not awful. I consider it better than all the cards in D tier, which is why I put it in C. It just doesn't fit in a lot of the decks just because we don't see Mortar Bait in the meta as much, but it's not a bad card. I mean, it's very, very annoying, and for 3 elixir can obviously provide a lot of value. Archers are going to be in, I think they're B tier. Kind of like I think they're better than the Dark Goblin. They get a lot of value in lots of situations because you can split them. And I just, you know, they seem pretty weak because they're only in Expo. But to tell you the truth, I just think it's because they don't synergize well in other decks. They actually are very, very strong, like the DPS they provide. And, you know, they do have a lot of counters like arrows and stuff like that. But again, just because you can split them, I just think in this meta, they're not great. But in other metas, they were to the point where they're even like A tier, stuff like that. But I think B, maybe very high end of C is where they belong right now. Earthquake, we're getting to another spell. This is going to be, I don't know if I want to put it in B tier or A tier. I mean, it's a pretty versatile card. It fits well in, obviously, Hog EQ, and then even some other decks can have Earthquake. I think I'm going to just, for now, put it in B tier just because there's a lot of Mother Witch in this meta, so it's not as strong as it was in previous metas. I think I before put it in like A tier. I think right now B tier is where it belongs. I do think it's better than the Zap, but alright, here we go. E-Drag is just going to go right into D tier. I have, you know, personally, I might have some bias because if you guys didn't know, one of my favorite decks to use back in the day was Giant E-Drag. I do think E-Drag's very, very weak right now. I think it's borderline where it could use a little bit of a buff, but it's definitely more viable than a lot of cards in the game, so I'm not going to put it in the F tier for that reason, but it certainly is pretty weak. Electro Giant, alright, this, you know, I'm going to put it in S tier because even though I don't think there's cards that are more broken than it right now, I think it's kind of on the lower end of the S tier because I think you could argue that this card needs a nerf. I think even if it doesn't get a nerf, it could get a rework. Some people say like it could be 7 elixir and maybe do like less reflection damage and stuff like that. I think it could be a rework because with Electro Giant, here's the problem with it. You either hard counter them or they hard counter you, right? Like if they have a Tesla and like a Goblin Drill deck, they hard counter you. But if they don't have like any building, they just can't defend unless of course they're using like P.E.K.K.A. But that's like the only case. And then it's like if they don't have a building, they don't have a P.E.K.K.A, it's like you can't defend. But if you do have one of those things, it's like you can't do anything when you... So it's so matchup dependent. It's one of the most matchup dependent win conditions in the game right now. I'm going to go Electro Spirit here. We're going to put it in A tier just because I think it's stronger than the Ice Spirit is right now. Just for that reason, I think it's like one of the strongest spirits, so it's going to be an A tier. I mean, very, very solid card. Fits well in Expo. Better than the Ice Spirit is in Expo, in my opinion. So the Ewis is actually going to go ahead and go into B tier. I remember it used to be like an A or S tier card, but it's kind of fallen out of the meta a little bit after it got those, you know, damage nerfs, if you remember. It's still like kind of an average card. I mean, it's still used in like RG, P.E.K.K.A, and stuff like that, but it's definitely not, you know, as strong as it used to be. E-Barbs, okay, this is kind of, they used to be an S tier. I think in my last tier ranking, I put them in S tier. They're going to be an A tier. I think the Goblin Drill meta is kind of keeping them from being broken. I think if Goblin Drill wasn't in the game, they would be an S tier, but because E-Barbs are so bad against Goblin Drill, they're going to be an A. And honestly, because of just how little I'm seeing them, I'm even tempted to put them in B, but I just truly believe the only reason why they're not broken right now is because of the Goblin Drill. If Goblin Drill was like deleted from the game or nerfed, E-Barbs would go back up to S. I can guarantee that right now. Okay, Elixir Collector is going to be in F tier, joining in with the Bomb Tower. Why is Elixir Collector so bad? Well, because pretty much if your opponent has an Earthquake, a Fireball, a Lightning, a Rocket, or like any spell, even like Goblin Drill Minor, the Elixir Collector gets little to no value. Now, I have kind of strong feelings on the Elixir Collector. I don't think it should get a buff. I think if Elixir Collector is too strong, it's an unhealthy card for the game. Like, I don't like the aspect it's like you're getting free Elixir. I just don't like it. Like, because if it's too strong and you don't have the right spell for it, it's kind of broken. Like, getting like 2 or 3 free Elixir, especially in like beatdown decks, it's a little... I'm okay with it where it's at. Even though I think if it got a buff, I wouldn't complain. Like, I could see why it could use one. I just don't like the concept of the card. So for that reason, I'm okay with where it's at. I guess you guys can let me know how you feel about that. Elixir Golem is going to go in F tier. Like, the card sucks. I mean, without the healer, it's like even worse. But because the healer's in D tier, Elixir Golem is probably the worst win condition in the whole game right now. Am I complaining about that? No. It's a very toxic card. I don't want it to be used in the meta. It's what allows bad players to beat good players. I mean, like, I'm sure you guys all know, like, Elixir Golem, it's like the most brain-dead deck in the whole game. I don't even want it to be strong. I'm fine with seeing it occasionally, but I do not want this card in the meta. We had to deal with that before. Remember that Elixir Golem Witch meta? It was when Executioner was broken. Speaking of Executioner, not broken anymore, as you guys know. It's going to go ahead and go into D tier. Kind of like the Wizard, you know, it's viable if you can somehow fit it in a deck, you know, like with Tornado, like Viper, Hog X NATO, and he even finished #1 with that deck. It's very, very rare, but, you know, it's possible to have success with it. Okay, so the Fire Spirit is actually going to go ahead and go into A tier. I think kind of like the Electro Spirit, it's better than the Ice Spirit right now. Fire Spirit, very, very good against, you know, Lava Pups. It gives you a chance when you're using Hog EQ to beat Lava Hound if you're using the Fire Spirit, and I just think it completely counters a Goblin Barrel, gives it a lot of value too, and yeah, for that reason, I just think it's A tier. So the arrows are going to go into B tier because I think kind of like the Earthquake, you know, arrows, you know, have a good amount of use rate in the meta. I mean, obviously they're very good in Lava Hound decks. Most Lava decks right now have arrows in them to be able to take out things like, you know, bait cards and the like bomber, which everyone's using. And now the Fireball is going to go all the way up into S tier because Fireball is the best spell in the whole game right now, without a doubt. Like, I think probably 50% of the games you play on average might have the Fireball. I think it has an insanely high use rate, and that's because everyone's using the Mother Witch. Like, it just makes sense to have the Fireball. Like, why? And even Graveyard decks now are using the Fireball. Like, if you're using a deck with Poison, why? Just why? Put Fireball in the deck instead of Poison. Like, I guarantee every deck in the whole game, pretty much that you can think of, is better with Fireball over Poison. So, either Fireball needs a small nerf or Poison needs a buff. One of those two things needs to happen, in my opinion, because right now, there's a huge imbalance in the spells, like, between Fireball and Poison. Okay, so Firecracker is going to go into A tier. Man, this card in Hog EQ, and sometimes you can see it in, like, mortar type decks, like log bait type decks, in competitive all the time. We're seeing it. It is so valuable. It doesn't need a nerf, but it is so strong for 3 elixir. If you don't have arrows in your deck, it is such a problem. It is such a problem, and it can often get like 5-6 elixir worth of value for only 3 elixir. It's very strong. I just think it's a strong card, but doesn't need a nerf. Good where it's at, but for 3 elixir, man, is it valuable. Fisherman is going to go into this. Now, this is a tough one. I think Fisherman's in B tier. I think it's like slightly above average. It's on the higher end of B, I would say. It's close to being A. The reason why I can't put it in A tier is because literally the only deck in the whole game, the only deck that has Fisherman is RG. Like, it's not even used in Giant anymore, mostly because Giant sucks. I think Giant's super bad. Might be biased, but yeah, Giant is not good. And yeah, Fisherman, it's like only good in one deck. So I can't really put it higher than B tier. It's just, I don't know, it's not really that good. Flying Machine's actually going to go ahead, go into C tier. Mostly because we don't see that Flying Machine Royal Hogs deck anymore. With the recruits, it's kind of fallen out of the meta because of the Goblin Drill. Maybe it even belongs in D tier, but I just see is okay just because I think like it can always get a couple shots in before it gets fireballed, so it is still getting value, but yeah, I don't know. All right, so another this is a kind of a tough one. I don't know if I want to put this in D tier or F tier. I think this is borderline F tier, but I'm gonna put it in D tier just because there is one pretty solid deck that has the Bowler, the Freeze, and the Balloon in it that someone actually finished top 20 in the world last season. And for that reason, because that deck is pretty solid in this meta, I will put it in D tier. Now, for the Furnace, I'm going to go ahead and put the Furnace in C tier. I think that after the buff it got, it's now a slightly below average card. I think some people overreacted and thought the Furnace was really strong. It is not really strong. After the buff, I think it's like kind of average, slightly below average even, but it doesn't need a buff anymore. I think that rework, I personally think the dev team did a really nice job of, finally making it viable in the meta, but without making it too strong. So that was actually, I would say, recently one of their best reworks they've done. So Giant, okay, so this is kind of a very, very tough one. I think the Giant is kind of, it's kind of like the Freeze borderline. It's man, I don't know. I really think the Giant sucks though. Like I think it's with the Elixir. I'm gonna just put it in F tier. I can't believe I'm doing this, and you guys could call me biased, but the Giant, hear me out for a second. If you think about it, it's the worst win condition in the game with the Elixir Golem. Those Elixir Golem and Giant are the worst 2 win conditions in the game. Think of like RG, Hog Rider, even like Expo's used more than it, Golem, Lava Hound, Ram Rider, you've seen P.E.K.K.A more, Battle Ram, you've seen P.E.K.K.A more. Like, Giant with the Elixir Golem, they're the worst 2 win conditions in the game. I mean, just if you think about it, this last like few months, even like year, Giant has never really been like one of the stronger win conditions in the meta. Like Electro Giant too, especially. Like, even Goblin Giant with Sparky, like I just think in competitive is used more. I don't know. I just think that the Giant deserves a little bit of love, like a little bit of a buff, maybe like a hit speed buff, something like that. I just think it's very weak. Like there's no point in using the Giant when every other win condition in the game is better. And that's why the Fisherman, I didn't put it in an ARS tier because it used to be used in Giant like a year and a half ago, but now no one uses Giant. So it's not even... Giant Skeleton's going to be an F tier. I don't think it's very good after the nerf it got. It just doesn't do the job anymore on defense. Yeah, if you get it to the tower, it can get some damage, but it's overall just very bad. I don't see it much anymore. Snowball is going to kind of go in C tier. I think it kind of belongs with the Zap. Like, it's one of the spells in the meta that is just not that, like, used a lot right now, just compared to, like, Log. I mean, really, like, Zap and Snowball don't get a lot of use rate in just because the Log is, like, much better. So the Goblin Barrel is going to go in D tier. I think I previously put it in C tier, but Goblin Barrel is, like, pretty weak right now because of the Fire Spirit. In fact, I'm almost kind of... it's kind of a card that's borderline F tier. The only reason why I'm not going to put it in F is it is only 3 Elixir, and if you don't run into a Fire Spirit, you, of course, it still is just as strong, but just due to the fact that Fire Spirit can fully counter it, it pretty much means if you match against Fire Spirit, like, which is essentially Drill Cycle, you're screwed. And we're getting close to the Drill, guys. So the Baby Dragon is a let's see here. Baby Dragon is actually, it's gonna go into B tier. It used to be like an A or S tier card, but I don't really think in this meta it's like broken or anything like that. I mean, maybe you could argue that it's A tier, but I don't know. I just think it's kind of like a card that's like a little above average, but it's not really, you know, it's not broken or anything like that. Goblin Cage, though, is going to go into A tier, the second best building in the game after Tesla. Very, very valuable. It's very good, obviously, against Electro Giant, you know, good against RG, just very, very good on defense, and then obviously that counter push potential you get is really, really nice as well. So Goblin Drill, here we go, guys, going to get our next S tier card. Let's go ahead and bring it up. I have to scroll up because it doesn't show the whole page at the same time, but there we go. Goblin Drill gonna go into S tier. The emergency nerf was not enough. Guys, do the math, right? A Goblin Barrel, you get 3 goblins for 3 elixir. The Goblin Drill, it's 4 elixir and you're getting 6 goblins, and you're also getting 30 damage on the tower at max level when you play it. It is so broken. I honestly think they should remove a goblin or just make it 5 elixir and it would still be balanced. Like, and it would still be used. Like, it is just so broken. It's completely shifted the meta. It's caused everyone to use like Dark Prince, Valkyrie, like all those cards. It's just shook up the whole meta, and it's just insanely broken. Imagine how good it would be if it didn't get emergency nerfed. Like, imagine if they waited to emergency nerf it. Oh my gosh, things would be even worse. But yeah, like pretty much 25% of the top 200 uses this deck. It might even be more like 30%. It's just absolutely insane. But yeah, Goblin Gang is going to go ahead and go into D tier. I just, like, I don't think it, like, kind of like the Goblin Barrel, like, I don't think it needs a buff, but yeah, bait is definitely not very good in this meta. You can see, like, pretty much all bait cards are, like, in C, D tier, kind of. Goblin Giant is going to go into, I don't know, this is kind of a tough one. I actually think I'm going to put it in D tier because it's really only good with Sparky, and Sparky itself isn't even that strong in the meta, so I think D's alright. Goblin Hut is going to go in C tier, kind of with the Furnace. We see double spawner decks occasionally, especially in competitive, sometimes on ladder. I think, like, the Furnace, you know, it's an annoying card, and if your opponent doesn't have the correct spell, like, if they don't have an Earthquake or a Poison, it's going to be very, very obnoxious. Also, it's going to be pretty good against Electro Giant. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in C tier. Goblins are actually, this is very interesting. I'm going to put them, like, I'm going to put them in F tier because skeletons are like no one uses the goblins. I mean, like, why would you use the goblins when you can use skeletons to get way more value? It's going to be the same. While we're down here, let's just put the guards in F tier. Like, I would like to see goblins or guards get a buff because right now it's literally all skeletons. Like, it's all skeletons. Like, why would you use guards or goblins when you can just use skeletons? So for that reason, they're in F tier. They're not used very often. Like, guards aren't even used anymore in lava. Like, everyone's using barbs in that, or now some people are using lava cycle with skeletons. Like, they're just really trash in my opinion. I don't know. I think they could use a buff. Golem in this meta is actually, so a lot of people got a little worried when Golem was getting nerfed, but Golem is actually going to be in B tier. I think that it's, in this meta, it's actually quite strong, like Golem Clone. A lot of people are using it because it counters all, like, the drill cycle decks. So, you know, Golem's still a pretty solid card even after the nerf it got. I can't put it in an A tier just because, you know, like, Electro Giant's obviously way stronger than it. You know, RG2, which I'm going to get to. Like, there's a lot of win conditions that are just stronger than it. All right, here we go. So Graveyard is going to go in, actually, C tier. I feel like because of all the Mother Witch, it's not in, like, B or A anymore. It used to be quite broken. I think Graveyard is still viable, though. It's kind of in, yeah, in terms of average of win conditions right now. But, yeah, it's fine where it's at. I think Mother Witch actually helped, kind of helped balance it a little bit because it used to be really, really broken, especially in competitive. Like, everyone was running it. So, Heal Spirit is going to go into C tier, actually. I am not going to put it in, right now, no one's really using Heal Spirit because Elixir Golem isn't really good anymore. RG now is being used with Electro Spirit or with Cage in this current meta, so Heal Spirit definitely took a little bit of a drop in use rate. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in C as slightly below average. It's definitely not in D. Like, for 1 elixir, it's still so valuable, but it's definitely not it's not one of the stronger cards in the meta, I guess is the best way to put it. Balloon is going to go ahead and go into A tier because I just feel like Balloon has always been one of those win conditions that's above average. I just, you know, I don't know. I just for 5 elixir and the fact that you can almost always get death damage even if you don't get a balloon hit is just, to me, is what makes the card so strong. I even before, I think, put it in S tier, but because they nerfed, I believe it was the death damage, I now only put it in A tier. But like Lava Loon's always been super consistent, and you see like balloon decks like the one Pompeo uses, like with Cage, like Cycle. It's just, yeah, it's just a very strong win condition. Always has been one of the strongest win conditions of the game. So yeah, just put it in A tier. Hog is going to be in B tier. I think it's kind of right with the Golem in terms of like how often people are using it. Actually, I don't know. Hog EQ is pretty strong right now with the Tesla. I'm very tempted to put it. I am going to put it in front of the Golem though. It's definitely better, just to showcase like it's better than the Golem in the meta. But I don't know. I think Balloon's a little stronger in this meta. I mean, there is a lot of like Goblin Drill Cycle decks. So most people are using that instead of Hog, and Balloon counters those like Goblin Drill Cycle decks. So Hog, you know what? Let's just put it B tier. It is better than the Golem though as a win condition for sure. So Hunter is going to actually go into F tier. It's a pretty bad card. I think cards like the Musketeer and Ewiz are just much better than it. There's really no point in using the Hunter. They definitely kind of killed the card when they nerfed it. I think they nerfed it like 0.4 on the first hit. Maybe they could add 0.2 back, and that would maybe make it balanced, because it went from being broken to completely horrible, because now it sometimes dies before it even is able to get a shot in, which is just not good in my eyes. So I think it could use a little bit of a buff. The Ice Golem is going to go in C tier, as well as the Ice Spirit, just because they both are kind of like the Ice Golem in this meta. I don't know, the Ice Golem you could even argue should be in D tier, but I just think for 2 elixir, it gets for a lot of value, like kiting cards and like freezing everything. It has a lot of mechanics to it. Same with the Ice Spirit. But the Electro Spirit right now is better than the Ice Spirit, as well as the Fire Spirit, so that's why I'm putting the Electro Spirit in C tier. Same with the Ice Golem, because I just think that the Valkyrie is way better than the Ice Golem right now. Like, most people are using the Valkyrie over the Ice Golem, the counter Goblin Drill, so for that reason, it's going to go in C. The Ice Wizard is going to go in D tier. I think originally I had it in like B tier or A tier, but you guys can see now that the Fireball is able to take it out, it's definitely taken a hit. It's a lot weaker right now. Does it need a buff? No, I don't think it needs a buff, because it is 3 elixir and it still works in Graveyard and it works in Ice Bow alright. It is still viable, but it's definitely pretty weak. The Inferno Drag is going to go into A tier because I think it's a little better than the Baby Dragon. We see lots of lava decks with Inferno Drag right now. We see Electro Giant, which has Inferno Drag in it right now. And I just think overall it's used slightly more than the Baby Dragon. I don't know exactly why I'm comparing it to the Baby Dragon, but I guess because they're both, you know, dragons. I'm kind of explaining why I'm putting the Inferno Drag slightly higher in this meta. I just think also there's not as much Ewiz 2 in this meta, and it just overall is getting a lot of value, because Fireball doesn't do that good against it, because it only takes out half the Inferno Drag, and then it'll, you know, stay alive. So it's just because there's not a lot of lightning right now, I think that's why it's quite good. The Inferno is going to go into D tier. The reason why I'm putting it in D is because I think it's better than the you know, Elixir Collector and the Bomb Tower, but it's definitely one of the weaker buildings if you're comparing it to like Tesla and Cage and stuff like that. You can see everything in Logbait is kind of like D tier. That's why Logbait is not that good right now. Knight is gonna be in C tier, just because after that hit points got it's a little weaker, but it's still obviously pretty strong in Graveyard decks. It can be used in Expo, you know, Logbait. It's definitely not of a need of a buff, but it definitely took a hit. Lava Hound is going to go into, I think in this meta, it's actually A tier. There's a lot of Lava Cycle, and then obviously with the Balloon, like half the time when you see Balloon, it's paired with the Lava Hound, so they kind of fit well together in the same tier. There's a lot of Lava Loon decks right now. There's a lot of, you know, some lava decks without the Balloon, like you see like the Flying Machine, the Goblin Cage, Skeleton Dragons, sometimes even the E-Drag. So lots of lava variants in competitive and both ladder right now, and I think it's, you know, fitting for A tier for sure. The Lightning is going to go into... This is actually an interesting one. I think the Lightning is almost in D tier just because it's really only used in Electro Giant, which is one deck. Yeah, I don't know. It might maybe C. Like, I don't think it's a horrible card. I mean, if you're comparing it to the Clone or the Freeze, I think it's better than those two cards, but it's just not really... I just think C tier. You know, it's a little below average right now in this current meta. It's really only good with Golem and Electro Giant. That's kind of about it. So for the Bandit is... I'm going to put it in B. I think it's very solid, you know, for what it is. It's annoying. It punishes pretty well, defends pretty well. It just doesn't fit in everything, but I mean in P.E.K.K.A. and in like Bridge Spam, it's definitely what helps make those decks work for sure. And for that reason, I think B tier is an okay place to put it. Lumberjack is kind of an interesting one. I remember before it used to be like S tier. I consider the Lumberjack to be kind of... Right now, I feel like it's okay where it's at. It's kind of used in, like, Golem, and then, like, sometimes you see Lumberloon. I don't think it's a good card if it's too strong, so I'm okay with where it's at. I'm just trying to think if maybe it should be C tier or the Bandit too. It's kind of hard to decide, but I don't know. The Magic Archer, on the other hand, though, I'm going to put in C just because why would you use the Magic Archer when you can use, like, Mother Witch, right? Which we didn't get to yet, but Magic Archer, I think, is C tier. So... Now we're getting to Mega Knight, and you guys might be kind of surprised here, but I'm going to put it in D tier. I know a lot of you guys at mid-ladder are probably like, what? Mega Knight in D tier? Okay, here's why I don't think the Mega Knight's that good. P.E.K.K.A, I think in this meta is better than the Mega Knight, and P.E.K.K.A decks counter Mega Knight decks. I just don't think Mega Knight is very good against Electro Giant decks. It's not very good against RG. I just think it's just not very... strong in the current meta. There's also not a lot of people using Royal Hogs because there's so much Fire Spirit, so much Drill, so much Fireball. So without the Mega Knight having a lot of, you know, being able to counter Royal Hogs as much because people aren't using the Royal Hogs as much, it's just not very good in this meta. I don't think it's a very strong card. It's very easy to take out. You know, obviously... Like, the Inferno Drag's good against it, the Tesla's good against it, like, any kind of tank, like the Valk, like everyone's using right now, is just so easy to counter, and it's just not very good for the Elixir it is. I'm gonna go for Mega Minion in kind of, actually, I'm gonna put it in B tier. I think C would be kind of bad to put it in, just because it's Mega Minion is, for 3 Elixir, there's no other card that does what it does, like Flying, Mini Tank for 3 Elixir. Miner is going to go into... A tier. I think I last tier list put it in S tier. The reason why I'm putting it in A is because the Goblin Drill is insanely broken right now, and it's replaced the Miner in a lot of decks, but we still see the Miner in Lava Loon decks, or like Lava decks without the Loon. We can also sometimes see it in Mortar decks. We'll sometimes even see it in like Miner Wall Breaker still. Some people prefer to play it instead of the Drill. It's still a strong card, but it's definitely not S tier anymore after the Goblin Drill got added to the game. And keep in mind, guys, it's not supposed to be a win condition only. I think a lot of people think the Miner isn't OP just because it's not, you know, supposedly a win condition. It's supposed to be kind of like a support card. You know, your Miner isn't supposed to be the only win condition in the deck, so keep that in mind. That's why I still think it's a very, very strong card. It does its job very well as a support card, getting some tower chip and also taking things out. So, Mini P.E.K.K.A coming in here. It's going to be in, where do I want to put the Mini P.E.K.K.A? I feel like Mini P.E.K.K.A actually is B tier. I remember there was one point where it was so broken and it was S tier, and I think it was because the range of it was really long or something, but it's kind of B tier, like right along with the Lumberjack in my opinion. It's just kind of, I don't know, like, it's very good in like Golem decks, and some people use it in like Cycle decks as like their main tank killer, but, you know, it's alright. It's kind of close to C, kind of like the Lumberjack, but... The Minion Horde is going to go into... I actually think the Minion Horde is almost like F tier, honestly. Am I going to put it in F tier, though? I don't know. I think I'm going to put it in D tier because we do occasionally see Lava Hound, like, double minions, but, man, the Minion Horde is not very good. I'm going to be honest with you guys. It is not very good. I honestly could put it in F tier. I could. It's almost F tier. If it got a buff, I wouldn't complain. I could see why it could get a buff. I'll just leave it where it's at, though. Okay, Mirror, while we're already down here, we're just going to go ahead and stick that in F tier. It's one of the worst cards in the game. I think we got it. For these 9 cards right here, I think these are definitely, like, the worst cards in the game. So I'm fine with my F tier list. I think all these cards could use a buff or rework of some sort. The minions are going to go ahead and go into... where do we want to put the minions? The minions are kind of... They're definitely not A tier, but I think they're B tier. They're actually, like, pretty solid right now in this meta because they've pair well in that lava deck, the cycle one, I mean, and I just think what's different about them than the minion horde is if you play against arrows, you can still win, but if you're using minion horde and playing against arrows, that makes things a lot more difficult and they don't get as much value. But yeah, minions are not... They're also good in P.E.K.K.A. too. They're just not bad, I would say. So the mortar, we're going to go ahead and put that in... I actually think Mortar's going to go in B tier too. I think it's kind of like a little bit of like a high skill cap card in my opinion. But if you use it very, very well, like you can get a very good finish with it. It's very, defensive. It's very good against Electro Giant. I think it's a solid win condition. And support card, Mother Witch is going to go in S tier. I don't even need to explain that very much. It's just so broken right now. So broken. Needs a nerf. Kind of like the Goblin Drill, it's really shifted the meta. It's okay if the Goblin Drill, Mother Witch are strong and the Fireball and the Electro Giant are strong, but I feel like they change up the meta way too much and they just causes like some cards not to be good. Like, I don't know, just like Log Bait in general and like that Mega Knight Bait deck and just any deck. If you don't have Fireball, you pretty much are going to have a tough matchup against Mother Witch most of the time. The Musketeer is going to go in C tier. I think it's better than the Ice Wizard is and than the Hunter are, but they're just not really... it's alright, but... Actually, I changed my mind. Musketeer, I think, is B tier. I see it a decent amount. I think Musketeer, it's not bad, if I'm being honest. Barbarrel is going to go in A tier. I think it's very strong in this meta as a 2 elixir card, used way more than Zap and Snowball are. Mother Witch, or Night Witch, excuse me, is going to go in... It's so good with Golem. I'm going to put an A tier just to make a point that the reason why Golem's strong is because of the Night Witch, not because of the Golem itself. P.E.K.K.A. is going to go in B tier. It's kind of made a comeback in the meta because it's really good against Electro Giant. P.E.K.K.A. Ewiz is one of the best counters to the Electro Giant Inferno Drag deck. Poison is going to go all the way down into D tier because of how strong the Fireball is. Poison's just not really that good. Prince is going to go into... Prince is actually... It's not a bad card. I just don't think it fits in a lot of decks in this meta. But I have to put it in B tier. It's just not bad. I just don't think it's the right meta for it because of the Goblin Drill, But it's not a bad card, if that makes sense. Like, it's really not a bad card, and it used to even be in, like, A tier or S tier, I remember, after the buff got. Princess, I'm gonna go in D tier. Like, every single Log Bait card is D tier for the most part. It's kind of insane. Rage is D tier as well. I can't put it in F tier because I don't think the Rage needs a buff. I think if it got a buff, that would be absolutely scary because it's 2 elixir. I think it would be too valuable. I'm just gonna have to stick it in D tier. Ram Rider is going to go in... where do we want to put Ram Rider? I'm going to say B tier because we're seeing P.E.K.K.A. Ram Rider used a bit more. Rascals are going to go into C tier just because, I don't know, they even after the buff, they've still proven to be pretty weak. Barput is actually... it's actually going to go in F tier. It's kind of like the Bomb Tower, really horrible. Rocket is going to go into D tier because it's just compared to the Fireball, not very great in the meta, very risky to use in the meta because of all the Mother Witch. The Delivery, we're going to put the Delivery in... Actually, I'm going to put it in D tier also with the Rocket. Like, I just think both of them in this meta are not very good. They don't need a buff, though. It's just not the right meta for them. It's like the problem is the Mother Witch causes every other spell besides Fireball to be, like utterly useless essentially. The Ghost is gonna go ahead and go into, it's gonna go into C tier. Like, it's really only good in P.E.K.K.A. Like, I just, it's not D. I think it's more valuable than that, but yeah, it's not that good. Like, you know, it's mostly just good in P.E.K.K.A. The RG is gonna go into A tier. It's one of the strongest win conditions in the game. It's probably even stronger than the Balloon is, but I don't really think it's as good as like Electro Giant, and I don't think it needs a nerf because I don't know. I just don't. I would like to see other win conditions get a buff like the Giant, which will help maybe reduce the use rate of the RG. I don't really know though. The Royal Hogs are actually going to go all the way down in D tier because everyone in this meta is using Fireball, and there's so much Bomber in this meta. There's just so much Splash in general that I just can't put it much higher. It's just, in this meta, they're not very good. Recruits Royal Hogs, no one's using anymore because of like all the Valkyrie, all the Drill, all the Fireball. The Recruits, though, are going to go in C tier because I think they're a little better than the Royal Hogs. I just think the Royal Hogs are just pretty much useless in this meta, but the Recruits, at least, I think can get some value. Like, I still in competitive see like Recruits Balloon and stuff like that, but I don't know, they're pretty weak too in this current meta. Skarmy is kind of just C tier, like the Recruits, because it sure gets a lot of value against, you know, lots of win conditions sometimes, but any kind of spell, and it really only pairs well in Golem Clone right now. It's not the greatest. Skeleton Barrel is actually kind of D tier. I think after the nerf it got, it really just hasn't been used anymore. Mega Knight bait with the Skeleton Barrel is completely dead because of the Mother Witch, so it doesn't fit well in any deck. It's not very good at all. It's almost, I would say, borderline F tier too. Skeleton Dragons are, I'm just going to put them in C tier because I see them a good amount in Lava still, and I just think if I'm looking at all the cards in D tier, just compared to them, they're just used a bit more, and obviously their sole purpose is pretty much Lava. Like, that's going to be the only deck. And then here we go, another like S tier card are going to be the Skeletons. The Skeletons are just, I don't think they need a nerf, but they're so broken in the way that like they fit in so many decks. They even fit in Lava Hound decks now, Lava Cycle, you know, Goblin Drill Cycle, Hog decks, you know, like Minor Wallbreaker decks, Mortar decks, pretty much like every deck they can fit into. Expo, they're so versatile, and just for one elixir they provide so much value and just utility that I just, you know, I have to put them in S tier. I don't necessarily think they need a nerf, but Skeletons have just always been really strong in my eyes. They've just been really for years they've been just great in so many decks. The Barbarians will go into B tier. I think that you know what, they're C because I just realized in this meta there's just so much Valk, there's so much Fireball. They're not as strong as they were in the last metas, but they're still solid in Lava decks. And as a defensive card, I don't think they should be much higher. The Sparky, I'm going to go ahead and put it in D tier. After the nerf it got, it's been pretty weak since then. It before was like in B tier, I would say maybe even like borderline A tier, but it was never broken. I don't know why it ended up getting a nerf. I just think a lot of people complained about it because it was like frustrating to defend, but it's really bad now after the nerf it got, especially in this meta. Could even use a buff, but I don't know. I just don't think it's F tier. There's obviously a lot of cards worse than it, but it's very, very weak. Spear Goblins are going to go into A tier. They're actually very, very, like, for how cheap they are, they get a lot of value, especially paired it with, like, Tesla decks and stuff like that. And speaking of the Tesla, it's going to go into S tier. It's the best building in the whole game right now. A lot of people just used it in the past in Expo, but now it's used in Goblin Drill Cycle decks. It's used in Hog decks. It's used in... There's even this RG deck that has it in it. It's like RG Ghost, Electro Spirit, kind of like a cycle version of RG with the Tesla. It's a very good building. It's very, very broken, though, for only 4 elixir. I would like to see a lifetime nerf of the Tesla of 5 seconds. I don't think that would kill the card. It would help balance it out a little bit because it's just way too strong right now in my opinion, and every other building is just worse compared to it. It's just so valuable. Log is actually going to go into S tier as well, and this is a card that I don't, kind of like the skeletons, I don't necessarily think need a nerf. It's just a card, and yeah, I said cards in S tier most likely do need a nerf, but it's just a card kind of like the fireball and the skeletons that are just, it's just kind of like, it's just, you know, good in the meta. It's very versatile, and it's just compared to other spells so much better. So I don't know if that means some other spells need a buff, or Log maybe does need another slight nerf, but I feel like Log has been nerfed like 3 times, and it still always remains to be the best 2 elixir spell. It's kind of funny how that works, but yeah, that's just how it's been for a while now. 3M are gonna go into, I actually think, do I want to put them in D tier or F tier? Oh man, I don't know. This is a tough one. I'm gonna put them on the very high end of F tier. Like they're borderline. It's borderline F tier, borderline D tier. They're very weak though. The Tombstone is going to go into, it's actually gonna go into D tier. It's only used in lava. That's kind of it. But it's better than the Bomb Tower and the Bar Putt. The Tornado is going to go all the way up into A tier. Been a very strong card for a long time. Very controversial card. Some pros think that it needs a nerf. I guess you guys can let me know what you think of that. I think it could use a very small nerf or a rework, but I don't think it's a broken card, you know, compared to some of the other cards in this meta. The Valkyrie is going to go into A tier because in this meta, everyone is using it because of the Goblin Drill. I mean, it's what's making Knight kind of weak. Part of that is because everyone's using Valkyrie and everyone's using Drill. Valkyrie is definitely belongs in A tier in this meta. Like, I see so much Valkyrie right now in Drill Cycle. A lot of people are using Valkyrie, and not just in Drill Cycle. I even see it, some people are choosing to use it in like Lava Hound and even like heavier decks like that just to make sure that they do have a counter to the Goblin Drill. The Wall Breakers are going to go into B tier. I think in this meta, more people are using, you know what, actually they're going in A tier, just because there's so many people using Goblin Drill with Wall Breakers. I was going to say a lot of people are using it instead with Log instead of the Wall Breakers, but there's still a lot of Wall Breakers. And for 2 elixir, how much damage they do to towers and like how they can splash cards too is absolutely absurd in my opinion, so I'm just going to put them in A tier. The Bats are actually, while we're up here, we're going to put them in A tier as well. Kind of like with the Night Witch, because the Night Witch is really strong because of the bats. It's not even because of the Night Witch itself. And that's what makes Golem strong, as I mentioned before. And the last card we have is going to be the Witch. So this is kind of a tough one because I think it's kind of borderline F tier, but at the same time, you could also argue that it's D tier. The only problem is as I'm looking in D tier, pretty much all the cards in there, for the most part, are a little better than the Witch. But I think I am going to put the Witch in D tier just because I don't really know if it needs a buff. The only problem I think is if the Witch gets a buff, it's going to be, I think, maybe a little bit too overwhelming because it already is a little much with all the skeletons it spawns and it does splash. So I'm worried if they buff the hit points too much or if they buff the damage, we might get into one of those metas like we had before where it was absolutely broken. So for that reason, if they do want to buff the Witch, they need to be really careful because I just think it could be, I don't know, I just think it could be too broken and potentially bad for the meta in the game. But you guys can leave your thoughts on that. Let me know how you guys think I did. The video actually ran a lot longer than I anticipated it would. I think the last one I did was about 40 minutes too, but I guess it was because I had a lot to say about the cards. There's just so many cards in the game now. Very long though. I might next time have to find a way to you know, shorten it up, but I guess you guys can always skip to the end if you want to also, as I'm doing right now, kind of scrolling through all of them. But yeah, let me know like what I should have done differently, how I should have you know, ranked some of the cards differently. I mean, I'm sure there were a couple that if I were going back now and I had like more time to think about it, I would have you know, changed my decision, but I think overall I did pretty good. But yeah, you know, feel free to let me know in the comments, and I'll probably do another one of these in about, you know, 2 or 3 months when the next balance changes come. And yeah, make sure to like the video if you guys did end up enjoying it. Subscribe if you aren't subscribed already. And thanks again. Until next time, guys.